a supersized 3-acre terrarium. Originally funded by Texas billionaire Edward P. Bass, its 6,600 panes of glass enclose 7.2 million cubic feet of space, including an artificial rainforest, desert, and tiny ocean, in addition to 3,800 species of animals and plants. When it opened in the early 1990s, it was hailed as one of the world's most impressive scientific undertakings. But it quickly became one of the most notorious too. This is Biosphere 2.
We must commit ourselves anew to a sustained program of manned exploration of the solar system, and yes, the permanent settlement of space.
There was a movie called Silent Running.
A space convoy on a strange voyage.
It was an Armageddon type scenario. The world had become uninhabitable and all the plants and animals that were stored in these domes out in space. I just knew I was going to do something that was connected to that movie. I was totally taken. Biosphere 2 was so ahead of its time. It was very difficult to explain what we were doing.
There were some drawings, and I carried a postcard around in my back pocket. So if I was at a party and someone asked me what I did, I would say, I'm helping build this. It's going to be completely closed to the outside atmosphere, and I'm going to live inside it for 2 years with 7 other people.
In the desert, 30 miles north of Tucson, lies a structure that is arguably both an architectural, engineering, and biological masterpiece. But its history, its building, its operation has been as multi-layered, as complex and troubling as the story of humankind itself, because Biosphere 2 is a man and woman-made mini-world. It consists of 7 miniaturized biomes, where biome means a community of plants and animals distinctive to a region. Altogether, these biomes cover a footprint area of 3.15 acres, or about 3 football fields.
The wild biomes of Biosphere 2 include a 20,000 square foot tropical rainforest, a 1 million-gallon ocean, a grassland and thorn scrub savanna, a mangrove marsh, and a 15,000 square foot desert.
The domestic biomes include a 24,000-foot intensive agricultural biome. Intensive in the sense of maximized yearly food production per unit area of soil, and a habitat for 8 humans, and for farmyard animals, goats, chickens, and pigs.
Below the various biomes lies an extensive so-called technosphere of tanks and pipes and wind machines and motherboards in symbiosis with the organic life forces of the biomes, so that together and guided by the human inhabitants who practice adaptive management, they make her go.
Biosphere 2 is like an aircraft carrier with a Garden of Eden on top and mighty machinery down below.
In the course of its 5 years of building, Biosphere 2 attracted highly favorable, indeed fascinated, worldwide attention from the media, the scientific community, European, Japanese, and Russian space agencies, as well as from NASA. It became the world's most touted science fiction adventure story, like a science fiction tale whose fiction was for real.
Synergetic group, a designation borrowing from Buckminster Fuller the concept of synergism, where the whole exceeds the sum of the parts. After a great deal of discussion, they became focused on building a practical working alternative to the consumer society gobbling up the natural world.
On building, in short, a society based on an ecological orientation with the Earth, to live off the environment, but without destroying it.
to utilize, but at the same time refurbish, the overgrazed, exhausted grassland.
To log but preserve and regrow the decapitated forests.
To harvest, but not exhaust, the threatened empires of the sea.
To restore the scarred and refuse-littered deserts.
To make cities livable once more. To show by personal example humankind's sustainable interaction with nature.
Before Biosphere 2, I and others in the Institute of Ecotechnics had developed Synergia Ranch, which is here, was one of our earliest projects. And we also developed other projects in other locations around the world, which included a conference center and farm in France, the art gallery in London, a seed plantation and station in northwest Australia. We built the RV Heraclitus, the research vessel.
This 10-acre experimental farm would serve also as a conference center, and in due course, yearly gatherings were held there. Gatherings at which well-known, indeed famous people began to accept the invitation to attend and participate. People such as Buckminster Fuller, William Burroughs, James Lovelock, John Lilly, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweigart, scientist Lynn Margulis, Thor Heyerdahl, Richard Dawkins, and many others.
These conferences were aimed in part at bringing C.P. Snow's two cultures together, at turning different cultural spotlights upon the various fields of discourse.
Be able to create an atmosphere that people could live in for 2 years, to grow all of our own food for 2 years, and to do what we said we were going to do.
4 men and 4 women are spending their first night in Biosphere 2.
In 1991, 8 researchers were sealed inside a futuristic glass complex near Oracle, Arizona, to spend 2 years living in a self-sustaining habitat.
We hope by building Biosphere 2 that we build the first prototype for a total life system that you'd be able to take to another planet.
Tonight we put a fascinating look into our future.
The developers hailed the experiment as a prototype for colonizing space, and it became a media sensation. News cameras captured the theatrics as 8 men and women were about to be closed inside Biosphere 2 in the fall of 1991.
They vowed they would grow all the food they needed, recycle their water, air, and waste, and live without supplies from outside.
I take my last breaths of this atmosphere, knowing that I will take breaths from a different atmosphere from all of you for 2 years.
It had taken 4 years to build a 3-acre, 9-story-high complex in the Arizona desert. The goal was for Biosphere 2 to support its inhabitants without help from the outside world. They would grow enough food on their half-acre farm, while the 5 wilderness areas would naturally recycle their air and water. Scientists from respected institutions, like the Smithsonian and the University of Arizona, signed on as paid consultants and helped the project gain credibility.
When Secretary of Commerce Robert Mosbacher visited the site, he called it a noble experiment.
But the biggest payoff from Biosphere 2 could be a better understanding of our world and of how we might someday live on other worlds.
We wanted to pack as many different organisms in there as we possibly could, with the full knowledge that not all of them would survive.
It was such a wonderful group of people working towards a common goal, and a goal that I really had as well, which is to learn about the Earth.
I don't think anything could have really prepared us for those 2 years inside Biosphere 2.
I didn't have an illusion that we were entering utopia. Paradise in terms of the living systems, it was very beautiful. But I knew that there would be problems with us human beings.
While their home video shows them feasting, the truth is the biospherians have had trouble growing enough food to sustain themselves. Tabor McCallum has lost 54 pounds, though he says he's okay.
I really do like my new weight much more.
In February 20th, 1992, the Biosphere 2 crew announced the birth of a new baby galago in the rainforest. The baby galago, believed to be about 3 weeks old, marked the first primate birth in Biosphere 2. The gestation period of the galagos, 130 days, suggests that the newborn was conceived in Biosphere 2. In March 27, 1992, 6 months into its 2-year closure, the Biosphere 2 crew surpassed its first major milestone and set several world records, living inside closed ecological life support system longer than any predecessor. One member of the Russian crew of the Bios 3 facility in Siberia lived 6 months inside. However, Bios 3 did not recycle waste, and supplied less than 50% of the food. By 1993, the oxygen concentration in the air inside Biosphere 2 fell to 14%, roughly equivalent to that at the peak of a 17,500-foot mountain. Atmospheric CO2 rose to about 1,700 ppm, similar to a level last seen approximately 50 million years ago shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Nitrous oxide, a trace gas emitted from the microbial decomposition of soil nitrogen, rose to 79 ppm, a level that can reduce vitamin B12 synthesis to levels that damage the brain. Failed crops resulted in the restriction of their diets to 1,750 calories per day. Species extinctions were startling. 19 of the 25 vertebrate species in Biosphere 2 went extinct. Although galagos reproduced in Biosphere 2, a number of pollinating insects were lost to ant predation, and several bird species were lost. All pollinating species went extinct, and insect pests, like cockroaches, boomed. In practice, ants, a companion to one of the tree species, Cecropia, in the rainforest, local to the area, had been unintentionally sealed in and had come to dominate. However, many of the pollinating duties were performed by those ants and cockroaches. In 1993, fresh air had to be pumped into Biosphere 2, the researchers were able to leave the system, and the test was over.
By the end of the 2-year mission, the Biospherians, in the words of Jane Poynter, had suffocated, starved, and gone mad. The group split into factions, disagreed over scientific goals, and barely spoke to one another.
There were some mean times. People did not talk to each other. It very much was a split of 2 groups. The main chasm between us was the different ideas of how we would manage the biosphere. Most of us were hungry most of the time. It was difficult to walk up a couple of steps without stopping to take a deep breath. So we put oxygen in. We said we were not going to do that, and we did that. So, in a sense, that was a failure.
Very often people got the wrong end of the stick. They thought it was some kind of survivalist game, some kind of showpiece, some kind of, do or die enterprise. It was very hard to get across the idea that it was an experiment. There's no such thing as success or failure in a scientific experiment.
If something doesn't work and we figure out why it didn't work, then it's not a failure.